Good afternoon, or rather good evening, everyone. This is so much fun. We have two authors new to the Poison Pen. Mary will be new to all of you. Katherine, many of you may have already met when she published The Lion's Den last year, which I thought was truly fabulous. And I'm still really pissed that I didn't discover it in time to do this last year. But look, what we did is we actually found some first printings of The Lion's Den, as well as the Siren, her new book, and she's autographed both of them, so you have a chance to buy the pair while they last. Yay. Mary's book,
Vanna White.
Yeah, Mary's book, The Photographer, is our May 1st mystery book of the month, and it's somewhere between Mary and the Poison Pen, so this is my copy. So we're really excited about that as well. Anyway, one of the things that's fun is that both our authors today have a background, some background anyway, in theater and acting, which I think informs their books, because when you read them, I think you can definitely tell that they've had some theater experience. Mary, I know, has a journalism background in addition, and she's been an editor. Katherine, I'm not sure what else in your busy life have you done besides some acting?
Oh, I was a photographer, actually, interestingly enough. I've been a yoga instructor. I have worked as a paralegal at one point. I was a personal assistant. I was a bartender. I was a waitress. I was a real estate agent. So I've done a lot of things.
But you know, that's really good. I mean, we all know that no experience in an author's life is ever wasted. So, you know,
It's true.
Yeah, no, the more you live, the more you have to put into your books, which I think is great. Anyway, I think that the authors probably will have a good time talking to each other. We kind of threw this together at the last moment. So
yeah, and for those of you watching
this, oh, sorry, Patrick, I forgot you. Do your thing.
My pitch. Yeah, for those of you watching on Facebook, I will be monitoring the comments field. So if you have questions for Katherine or Mary, is it Mary Dixie or Mary?
It's Mary Dixie, like Marianne, Mary Sue. My mom was from Tennessee, so that's how I ended up with Mary Dixie.
Okay, so if you have questions for Katherine or Mary Dixie, go ahead and put them in the comments field and I'll materialize in about a half hour or so and be happy to ask any of your questions. So into the mists I go for now.
Thank you. It's so Shakespearean. I just love the way Patrick Sue is great. Patrick disappears as though we're all watching, you know. And then I summon him up as though, you know, what's the Shakespeare play where that happens on the island? I'm having a senior moment.
The Tempest?
Oh, the Tempest?
Thank you. Yeah, it's like the Tempest. He comes, I thought he was Ariel, but he tells me he's Caliban. So we can all decide.
Oh,
Other way around.
Interpretation.
Yeah.
Other way around, Barbara.
Oh, sorry. You
Ariel,
decided to be
Caliban.
Ariel and not Caliban?
That's right.
Isn't that great?
I was Miranda in high school. My senior year of high school, I played Miranda in The Tempest.
Oh, wonderful. Mary Stewart wrote an absolutely brilliant one of her romantic suspense novels, and it was all set in the same place as The Tempest. And so I've always wanted to go to the island. I can't remember which one it is either at the moment and view that. But anyway, we're going to be modern. We're going to be talking about social media. We're going to be talking about women who would like to or are actually playing roles that might not be visible to everyone in their surroundings. So let's see, Mary Dixie, since you are the debut author and first alphabetically, why don't you tell us a little bit about The Photographer? And I know that you have read The Siren, so you'll be able to.
So I walked into the bookstore yesterday and I was excited to see it on the table there. And it must be a thrilling feeling to actually see the book in the bookstore, which I have yet to experience. But
even better if it's in the window.
Even better if it's in the window, yes. But
very, very true. I promise to send you a photo when they arrive, okay? We'll put them out and I'll send you pictures.
Okay. But anyway, did you ask me to tell about my book? I can't remember I lost track of the question. Okay. The Photographer, and I want to actually, later I want to ask Katherine about what kind of photographer you were. This is a book about a photographer who takes pictures of children. And her name is Delta Dawn. And she takes pictures of wealthy New Yorkers and their children, and goes to birthday parties and that sort of thing. And at the opening of the book, she goes to the home of Amelia and Fritz Straub to photograph their daughter Natalie's 11th birthday party. And she falls in love with the family. She becomes obsessed with this family. They live in a very glamorous townhouse. They're very glamorous architects, and they are everything that she wishes that she was. And so the book tells the story of how she insinuates herself into this family's life, or tries to insinuate herself into this family's life. And the idea for the book, which sort of sheds a little bit of light on the book, came from, I hired a photographer myself to take pictures of my two children. And this was a few years back. My children are now 10 years old and 8 years old, but this was a few years back. And then the pictures came back, and they were really beautiful pictures, but the children's eyes were cobalt blue, and they're not in real life. And so I said to her, I'd like for the children's eyes to be their real color. And she said, there is no real color. And I thought that was so interesting. And it like stuck with me that, that those words and that phrase stuck with me. The psychology behind it, and the idea that there's no real color, and then also that there's no real anything, that you just change it, you make it what you want it to be or you think it should be, and then it's almost like you disregard the starting point, the reference point, and it's all what you say it is and how you present it. So that the sort of core of the novel came from that. It's in first person, and it's the character of Delta Dawn is someone who thinks that way in a really more extreme way than most people do, because everyone does some of that, like, repainting their own story in a more better light or a more flattering light, or some changing it in subtle ways. But Delta Dawn really takes that to a huge extreme. So that's the basic premise of the book.
Catherine, I know you blurbed the book, so,
I did.
So what's
I'll
your
tell
version
you.
of the book?
I was lucky enough to blurb the book, and Mary Dixie's writing is so strong, and she portrays this character, and it's not just in the story. It is also in the way that the character thinks, the way that she talks, her sentence structure. All of those things are so baked into the book that Mary Dixie and I actually are at the same agency, and I had to ask whether, because she's a debut author, I didn't know. I said, is she really like this, or is this? Because it was that strong. It really was. You did such a great job of conveying this character, and it's creepy. I think my blurb was something like creepy from page 1, or disturbing, disturbing, because the way that she thinks, you can tell there's something off from the very beginning. She thinks it's like you use these short sentences, and very, like, she uses words that you might not necessarily normally use for something, and it's all perfect to the character, and it really unravels in a very perfect way, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. I mean, it's a quick read too. It's a very quick read. I read it really fast.
Well, thank you. I'm so grateful to you for reading it way early on and giving me a blurb, which makes, as you well know, makes such a huge difference.
That's blurb right there.
Yes.
Absolutely. Unsettling from page 1.
That's it. Yes.
Yep.
But yes, so that I am forever grateful to you for doing that, and thank you. So when you talk about Delta, you're sort of the way you talk about it is a little bit like the way an actor would talk about a character. So that's one subject that you tell about your book a little bit, and then maybe we can discuss our acting backgrounds, perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely. My book actually has a lot to do with the film industry. You know, I was an actor for many years, and I wanted to do something set in the world of film because the world of film can be so very insular. And shooting a movie can very much be like you're at summer camp, you know, in the best way possible or the worst way possible, depending on who the people that you're working with are. And the Siren follows 3 very different women. You have Stella, who is the actress starring in the film, and her ex-husband, Cole Power, is producing the film. He is one of the most recognizable faces on the planet. And they were married 10 years ago. And then shortly after their marriage, she had multiple very public breakdowns, sort of like in a Lindsay Lohan or Britney Spears back in the day type of thing. And she has not had a career since. So she's doing this movie because she really wants to get her career back on track. She doesn't really know why Cole has asked her to star in this movie because they don't have a good relationship. So that's one of the mysteries that's central to the novel. Another point of view is Taylor, who is the producer of the film, and she's more your identifiable character. She also is struggling to get her career back on track, though, after her last job ended in scandal. And she's taken this job working for Cole, who calls her short stack and kind of treats her like she's his personal assistant, even though she's his producer. But she's in a position where no one else would give her a job, and she needs to pay for her condo. And so she took this job and is really banking on the movie being a hit in order to stop working for Cole. And then the last point of view is Felicity, who is Stella, the movie star's young, beautiful, mysterious assistant. And with Felicity, I start from the point of view of her as 10 years old. All the rest of these characters start in the present, and Felicity's story starts when she's 10, and it's her and her mother when she's a lot younger and living in Florida, and that will become also central to the mystery of the novel. So you're seeing Felicity from an outside point of view as an adult, and then you're inside her head as a child in the beginning, and then the 2 storylines do catch up with each other towards the middle of the book.
So I want to say that the points of view are so fully developed, and doing the several points of view, I imagine, is not easy. But it also made me, like, knowing that you were an actress, it made sense because I felt like you embodied each one of those characters in such a full way. Like I felt that you really knew these people completely. And I also, like, going back to, I guess it was Felicity, it's like some of these moments with Felicity take you by surprise because they're so, like, kind of poignant. And so there's like a back and forth between the fun and amusing, and then this poignancy, which I find really gripping. So I cannot put it down. I got it yesterday, and I've been, like, sitting in the corner reading this book, and I cannot put it down. It's so good.
That's so good to hear. I love that. Yeah, it's interesting, you know, when you're talking about writing from different points of view, I definitely think that a background in acting helps because I definitely put myself in their heads. And I wrote Felicity's storyline as a child separately from the other two are kind of playing off of each other in the present day. And I took out Felicity's and I wrote it on its own and then pieced it into the manuscript. And then when they're all in the present, I wrote them all together because they have to play off of each other. But you know, it's so interesting because you have to, I like to write from the first person point of view. It's what I enjoy. It's what I like reading from the first person point of view, because you really feel like you're in the characters' heads. But that makes it very difficult when you're writing from 3 different points of view, because you have to constantly remind the reader whose point of view it is. I mean, obviously you put it at the beginning of the chapter, but you don't want them putting the book down to go cook dinner and then picking it back up and being like, wait a minute, who is this? Right. You know, so it was very necessary to make sure that the way that the characters talk and that they think is very separate. For example, Stella, the movie star, has a substance abuse problem. And she has a tendency towards grandeur as well. And so she's often, you know, things are slipping her mind, and she has these fantasies about herself, you know, being a star, and yet she's also very tragic. Taylor is much more modern and much more, she speaks the way that you or I would speak. And then Felicity, as a kid, I really had to make sure that she was talking like a child would talk, but a child who has been raised by a mother who is a sex worker and never hid anything from her. And, you know, so she cusses and she knows about sex, but only on a very basic level. So it was really, really interesting. That was my favorite thing about writing this book, was writing the 3 different points of view.
I felt as though you probably, I mean, you can answer this or not, but I did feel like that there were specific people that, or maybe it's more than one person, that you knew really well, that these characters felt like they must be modeled off of someone that you knew, or that you had some very firsthand knowledge of these people. Because like the detail about like that the swimming pool being empty, I thought that was so leaving the swimming pool empty because she couldn't afford to fill it up. I thought that was so specific, and I was thinking, like, do you know someone who did that?
I definitely, after many, many years in Hollywood, you know, I do pull things. There are things that stand out to me about people. And when I'm writing, I do think about specific people. I don't base characters on any one person because they have to be their own person with their own their own desires, you know, in order to make the character arc work. But there is no shortage of desperate actresses in Hollywood to choose from, and also people who have had money and then lost it. And she's really trying to hold on, and she's the type of person who has, like, you know, all these, like, you know, magnets on her refrigerator that are like, you know, believe in yourself, follow your dreams. And she's probably practicing like The Secret, you know, if you believe it, it will be, you know, that type of wishful thinking. So she's not going to sell the house. Absolutely, she's not going to sell the house, and she's going to continue driving that Range Rover that's, you know, 15, 20 years old, because she believes that she will again be a star. And that's one of the most tragic things about her, is that at 40, she's still like clinging to this idea of stardom, and yet she hates it. And she hates what it's done to her. She hates what the paparazzi did to her, and yet she still yearns for the warmth of the limelight.
Celebrity is a really hard thing to manage. We've talked about this at the store. After 32 years, we have watched many an author go across a curve. And, you know, some become really rich and famous and some do not. And it's always interesting to see how that affects character. You know, we often think that failure is easier to manage than success.
It's so true. And I think that that's where, you know, your upbringing and your values really come into play. I think that it's also, from what I've seen of, you know, I've seen a lot of people over the course of my career and being in Hollywood become very famous. And one thing that I actually hit on in The Lion's Den, one of the characters says, that's something that I believe, is that money doesn't change people. it just magnifies who they are. And I think it's the same thing about fame. It's not that it's necessarily changing their personality, but it's allowing them to be who they are, because there's no one stopping them. There's no one
Right,
telling
yeah.
them no. There's no one saying like, oh, you probably shouldn't act like that, you know, because everybody wants a piece of you. And that's true with either, you know, great wealth or of fame. People want to ride your coattails, and they're willing to stroke your ego in order to do that.
That's so true. And you know what? It works outside Hollywood. It's certainly been true in the political arena, as we have all observed over recent years. And you know, and even in sports, even it's hard. It's easy for people to become untethered. And I think it matters a lot what their family, you know, what their family background is, how their personal relationships are, and also who they hire. Because when you really become famous, generally you have to have help managing your life, certainly managing your social media, which today is so consuming. And what happens is that creates a screen. And those people that you hire, their job depends upon them being indispensable to you. And therefore they start creating a screen between you and the world, you know,
Yeah,
either telling you what you
that's
want to
so
hear
true.
or telling you what will help them maintain their job. And so you get even further distance from reality, you know. So you have to, fame's one of those things you have to be really careful what you wish for. So
It's interesting.
Sorry,
It's
go ahead.
interesting. I was going to say that it's interesting that you say that, because in Mary Dixie's book, her main character Delta, is trying to make herself indispensable to the family that she works for. And she manages to do that.
Yes, and
It's too
it's
bad
sort
we
of
can't have a discussion after, you know, I always want to do a book club when these things are over, like 2 months from now, when we can really talk about the whole book, because we can't, you know, or we're going to
It's
be
true.
stoned.
Spoiler
We're gonna be
alerts.
stoned for spoilers. We can't afford that. But so often, you know, the discussion would be so much more
would
interesting.
be, yeah, like it's on the tip of my tongue to jump in and say what I'm not going to say, but yes, she does exactly what we're talking about. And Amelia and Fritz are celebrities in their own way, in their own little world. They're kind of celebrities, or they act like it anyway. And Delta sees them as celebrities, but she does sort of worm her way in there to sort of fulfill their every need and their every wish in this very extreme way, fulfilling all these needs, and makes herself indispensable for each member of the family. And the thing that each person wants the most, she is able to give them that, or they believe that she's going to be able to give them that. And that's sort of like her hold on them and how she maintains her place there. So that's exactly, yeah, there's another, you know, it's sort of like the outsider trying to belong to this seeing very wealthy, educated family that she feels that she came from the wrong side of the tracks. And she's talented and smart and attractive, and she has all these qualities. She could have the life that she wants to have, but she sees the framework a certain way. She sees herself as the outsider who is not really part of that world. And it's kind of self-fulfilling. It just, her behavior keeps that going.
It's so interesting what you say about people, the way that she sees herself is what traps her in her, like, it's her own mental framework that is placing her in this world that's making her behave the way that she does, rather than, you know, trying to become an architect herself, you know, because
Right.
she sees her life in a certain way. And I think that that's something, like when you're creating a character, to see how they see the world and how they see themselves is so central to their identity.
Yeah.
And it's such an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, it is an interesting thing to think about, and sort of like on this subject of when both are our books are first person, but how does your, in a more specific way, how does your acting background, how do you use it when you're writing? Or is there a specific way that you do use it? Or do you think it just like seeps in there indirectly? Is there anything that you're clear about?
I think I've been acting, I started acting so young, and I had so much training that I think that it's ingrained in me. It's one of those things where, like riding a bike, where it's not that you don't think about riding a bike, you just get on the bike and you ride the bike. And if you're doing something more technical, maybe you have to think about, oh, I better lift the wheel up over here. But with acting, as for my characters, one of the things that I learned very early on in acting is never to judge the characters that you're playing. I would play a character who is murderous and I couldn't judge her. I had to understand her and understand that she thinks she's right. She is the star of her own show. It's the same thing. And this was even a harder one for me personally, is to play a character who's weak. Because, for me, strength is something that I always try and embody. And so to play a character who's weak, it's very easy to want to judge that character. It's the same thing when you're writing a character, like when I was writing Stella, and she's got, all these demons. But you can't, as the author or as the actress, you can't judge them. You have to understand them. And in understanding them, that's where the magic happens, because that's where you humanize them. It's the same thing with Felicity. She grew up in a background that is absolutely nothing like the background. Actually, none of these characters grew up with a background that's in. I'm very fortunate to have had loving parents. But a lot of the characters that I write don't have loving parents. But I had to understand the way that she sees life and allow her not only to make her choices, but not to pigeonhole her into, okay, because she came from this, she's going to become this. Allow her to learn and grow, and be there in her head as she does that in her own way. I honestly, I think the same things that drew me to acting are what draw me to writing. It's storytelling. It's getting in a character's head, whether you're becoming that character on screen or you are writing that character for other people to read and become that character as they read it. But people are so interesting to me. And that's why I love art. That's why I love writing.
Yeah. I think so much the same way about acting and writing. Excuse me. They're so similar to me. Like the kind of thought process that I have when I'm acting and the thought process I have when I'm writing are really close. The kind of like finding who this person is, almost like in your body, finding who the person is. And if I'm writing, I find myself, kind of putting my body in the position that this character might be, the way they might be standing, the way they might be holding their head or their hand or their, just so that I can like feel how they think. And that's the way that I would approach acting. And is also the way that I approach writing, is like to really get, kind of get into their body and have the voice lead me, which is kind of what I did with Delta Dawn, get into her head and have her voice lead me and tell me, where she's going, what she's deciding to do. And which, obviously it's different when you're acting, you're not writing you're usually not writing the play or the film or whatever, but the same kind of techniques I feel like are so applicable to both.
You do
100%.
Yeah, you both have talked a lot about characterization and how acting allows you to inhabit your characters. But the other thing I think is true of your books where the acting comes in is blocking out your scenes, because, acting also requires you to, to see the landscape and, to know how people are going to pace themselves, how they're going to move through whatever room or situation, whatever it is. And I felt that that aspect of your book, not just the characters themselves, but the way that you move through the story, showed your theater background, both of you.
It's interesting that you say that. I did a lot of horror movies when I was an actress. And one of the things that I learned early on is you have to watch out for yourself and make sure that the things that your character is doing when someone's chasing her with a knife into an apartment and she passes the cordless phone. She can't pass the cordless phone. You have to, as the actress, know to say, hey guys, there's a cordless phone there. Why am I not grabbing it? And you do the same thing as a writer. You have to make sure you're setting the scene where there's no cordless phone that character can grab if someone's chasing her, because otherwise the scene's over. You have to make sure that there's no, especially when you're writing, big climax scenes with a bunch of action and that type of thing, you have to make sure there's no out. And that you're never jumping the shark. This person would never do this. Why would anybody ever, no one would act this way, because readers are smart. And they're gonna call you on it, and they're gonna not want to continue reading, because once you lose their faith, it's this, we read in a sense in a state of suspended disbelief. And if you do something that disturbs that state, you lose your reader. And so you have to be very, very careful with setting the scene, never to lose that reader.
Yeah, it's interesting that you said that, Barbara, because when I write, I start with a dialogue. And I think it's because of my acting background that I start with a dialogue. It's like, that's what's in my head first, is the dialogue. But obviously the difference between writing a novel and writing a play, or being in a play, is that you need to be the set designer, and you need to be the director and the costume designer, and you need to be the visual effects and the audio effects and everything else. And so even though I start with the dialogue, and that's kind of what propels me through the first draft, I would say, it's very lean on the first draft, with just a little bit of sketching out what's going on, but a lot of dialogue. And then I go back and then I start to think about the set design, and try to really visualize the whole world. In the case of the photographer, that house was almost, I viewed it as almost a character in and of itself. The house was really, really important to Delta. Everything that it sort of symbolized a whole world to her. And it really is quite contained in that one place, a little bit elsewhere, but it's quite
It's interesting. We've talked to a number of screenwriters who've become novelists, and the biggest problem screenwriters have when they become novelists is they don't write enough, because they are so used to. Now, I'm really serious. I had a great discussion with, I'm trying to think of his name, it'll come to me in a minute, a really well-known screenwriter who's just written his first novel, Will Staples, his first novel called Animals. And, that was his problem, is that because he's so used to a screenplay being, dialogue in few directions, and the camera and the actor take care of all that stuff that as a novelist, you actually have to create. So many screenwriters find it liberating to write a novel, because they're not then stuck in a pre-built set, and they have to figure out how do we work our way around the tower or something. But at the same time, they often need to amplify it. So this is a really fascinating discussion. Katherine, I want you to talk for a moment about The Lion's Den, because that is your first book, and since we have some, I thought it was a fabulous book.
Thank you.
Very different from, well, not very different, there are some similarities, but anyway, The Siren is not a sequel to The Lion's Den. It's a completely different book.
Yeah, The Lion's Den deals with money in the way that The Siren deals with fame. The Lion's Den is about a group of girls that go on vacation on one of the girls' sugar daddy's yacht, and they don't all make it back. It's really a book about the things that money does to people, and also about friendship and how it can change based on who someone becomes. The two main girls in the book, it's told from the point of view of Belle, who is a struggling actress, amazingly. And her best friend is this girl, Summer, who is a gold digger, to put it bluntly. And she's got this older boyfriend who's super rich. And Belle has always kind of been Summer's sidekick. Summer's a lot of fun. And she's always a little naughty. And Belle is a loyal person who wants to see the best in people. She and Summer have been friends since they were teenagers. So it's one of those friends that maybe you don't, as you're growing up, have a ton in common with anymore. But Belle feels a responsibility to her and has allowed her to stay on her couch when she doesn't have a job. And now that Summer finally has this rich boyfriend, she wants to take Belle and a number of other girlfriends on a trip to the Riviera aboard his yacht to celebrate her birthday. And Belle agrees to go. And then while they are aboard the yacht, it's not as advertised. They find that they're locked into their rooms at night. They're told where to sit and what to talk about. And there's also a backstory. The novel flips back and forth in time. And the backstory tells about how and why Belle came to be on that yacht. And the two stories do end up dovetailing in the end to lead to a big and I hope satisfying conclusion.
It's very good. In a way, it's a variation on the Agatha Christie country house murder scenario. You take a group of people and you put them in an enclosed space, and everything that happens there happens to just those people. If something goes wrong, whoever, either they allow in an investigator or there's already one present, depending on who it is. Hercule Poirot was invited to Christmas, with the old codger at the snowed-in country manor where the old codger is about to change his will, and nothing good can happen from this. But that closed circle is what allows you to write that book. And I really like the way you use the yacht in The Lion's Den to accomplish that, in the same way that Delta Dawn is to some degree that the house, that family lives in fills that structure, or the movie set that you've got, because movie sets are not just open, no. So I mean, it's almost impossible to escape that structure in a certain kind of story. I wanted to tell you, Mary Dixie, that there is, and I will send you the link to it, but currently, I think it was on Netflix, David Attenborough, the famous British film guy, has done either 2 or 3 hour-long episodes on the fact that animals see differently than we do. They can see different color range. A tiger, for example, that the animal it most often preys on in Africa is blind to orange and brown. So the tiger, it sees it green. So when the tiger is stalking it through the bush, the animal, is a variation of a gazelle, looks at the tiger and it doesn't see it because all it sees is the green. And David's developed this camera that allows him to show you that. And I'll send it to you because it really has a lot to do with the photographer, and it's amazing. It's also true in coral reefs and other things, but the fact that he has developed these cameras to show you how different animals, have different ways of seeing than we do, different color ranges, the whole bit, is absolutely fascinating.
I would love to see that. I would be so intrigued.
Use it in your other book talks. If people are going, seriously, can this be true? You can quote David Attenborough. So I'll find it and send it to you. Patrick, you're being lazy. Normally you'd look at your phone and by now you would have told me what the name of the David Attenborough is. So I'll do that while you pop back in and bring up questions, because I can do that. Anything else that either one of you would like to ask the other?
I was going to ask Mary Dixie, talking about setting, talking about, the yacht being integral to the plot of The Lion's Den and the island to the Siren. Do you, because you were talking about the house being so integral to the plot of The Photographer, did you find a house? Did you look at houses like either online or in person? Did you find a house?
I did look at houses. That's so funny that you say that. Yes, So I've been in, I live in Brooklyn, so I've been in a lot of townhouses through the years. I don't live in a townhouse, but I have been in a number of different ones. But the townhouse that I wrote about is not one that I've ever actually been in. I went online and looked at all these different real estate listings, and also, like, you know, Architectural Digest and different kinds of, and until I found something that felt like, what, this is the Straub house. I was looking for a specific vibe, which is sort of like, you know, very clean and modern and glamorous, but in a kind of a cold, hard way, a kind of cold glamour. So I spent quite a while, because I wanted, like, I wanted to like really know what the house was in, like, you know, very specific details about that house. So I spent quite a while looking for it. Yes, that's.
And so did you then base, you know, did you keep the pictures and did you base the actual book on this house that you found?
I did, but I veered away from it a bit. So, you know, I started with that as the basic house. And then there were some ways in which it didn't work for me, because I needed, you know, whatever, I needed them to have some outdoor space, and I needed them to have a garden apartment, and I needed certain things that house might or might not have had. Now I can't quite remember, but so you know, yeah, I sort of tweaked it in certain ways, but that was like the starting point. Yes, and that was fun for me too. And I did, when I was wandering around Brooklyn while I was writing this, I did look at houses and look at, like, you know, I couldn't just go into anyone's house, but I would look at the exterior of the houses and be like, because I pictured their house as, you know, Delta says in the book, it has a kind of an understated exterior, and then the inside is just like, they just ripped out everything that was there, and it's this modern extravaganza. So I walked around and would be like, you know, would that be it? Would that be it? And I found like a couple of examples of what I thought might be it. Yeah, so that was fun. I really enjoyed that, that part of it. That kind of research is fun for me. And also, now I'm just remembering one more question I had for you, which is your photography background. What kind of a photographer were you?
I shot fashion, I shot headshots, and I shot weddings.
Oh,
so
wow.
Kind of a jack of all trades.
Oh my gosh! So did you find that the way I talked about photography in the book, did it feel right to you as a photographer? Did it feel
completely? Absolutely, you nailed it. Yeah. Do you have a background at all as a photographer, or is that something that you researched?
I did research it. I don't have a background. I love photography. I appreciate photography a great deal. But I took a photography class while I was writing the book. Not anything, you know, not anything amazing, but I took enough of a photography class and a short, like, Photoshop class too, that I felt like I at least knew the language and I could use the language a little bit. And then I did ask a couple of friends who are photographers to read the book and, you know, help me if there was anything that felt wrong or off. So, but yeah, I mean, these days you can be a pretty good photographer on your iPhone. So I enjoy doing that, but I'm not a great photographer. I wish I was.
Well,
I feel like photography is really just about how you see the world, and I
Yeah.
think that's what makes a great photographer, is someone who can capture photographs that really that show us how they see the world.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Well, I
Yeah.
think we should ask Katherine whether you went house shopping. Did you go yacht shopping for the Lion's Den?
I
you-
did. I did.
Did you go yacht shopping?
I absolutely went yacht shopping. I didn't go, I mean, I have been on yachts. I did not go on yachts while writing The Lion's Den. I was, on my computer. I went on Google Maps a lot and did a lot of little walking around on Google Maps. But with the yachts, I perused yachts that were for sale. And they have their floor plans. And so, because in the Lion's Den, you really, with a yacht, because it is, it's such a compact space, even though it's big, you really have to know where you are, and you have to let the reader know where they are. Otherwise they get lost. And if they get lost, you lose them. They have to feel, because it's not real anymore. So I found the yacht, and I based the Lion's Den on a specific yacht. And I kept the plans, like for scenes that were written on the yacht, because there's a lot of running around on the yacht that happens, especially in certain scenes. I kept the plans so that and like you said, there were certain things, like there's a scene towards the end where I need the main character to be in one place and I need the other characters to be in another place. And so I had to find a way within this yacht plans to make that work the same way that you did with I Need a Garden Apartment, so you add to it, but it definitely helps me having those yacht plans. And I perused fabrics and things because for me, the textiles and things like that are very important. I did the same thing with the Siren. I looked at there's overwater bungalows in the Siren. One of the things that I really try to do with my books is convey a sense of place that is somewhat of an escape. So there's some intense stuff going on, but at least the setting that you're in is really beautiful, the Mediterranean or the Caribbean. So I wanted overwater bungalows because, who doesn't want to be in an overwater bungalow? And I wanted the readers to feel like they were in overwater bungalows. So I perused online and I looked at all the overwater bungalows and I picked okay, it's going to be like this. And then with the island separately, I had to find an island that had somewhat of the setup that I wanted my island to have. And then I fattened it over here and I tucked a harbor over here, but I have a map.
You have a real island.
I made an island. I drew my map. I pulled from different things and then I drew my map because I think it's so important for the author to always know where you are. Because if you always know where you are, then the reader will always know where they are. That's one of my pet peeves in reading books is when I feel like the author doesn't, they're kind of just being general, and you don't know, is it to the right or the left, and if I went to the right, and I go to the right and the right again, I've come back around to the center. We can't just keep going. It's these things stand out to me. So I always want to make sure that my readers are having the best experience that they can have inside my book.
That comes back to what I was saying earlier about your background as actors do allow you to dress the set and then, move the actors around the set in the same way that it might occur. I did find, you'll be happy to know, the David Attenborough thing. It's called Life in Color and it's on Netflix. So easy enough to find.
Wonderful.
And because he, is experienced in movies, I think he brings a very first person quality to the narration, which I think is great. So Patrick, you want to pop up and tell us goodbye or forward any comments or whatever you're doing? If he's there, there he is.
I'm here. Yeah. I think you've amazed them all because I'm not seeing any real comments or questions, just people watching and enjoying the conversation.
So you could put Life in Color on Netflix in the comments field if you want to, because sure enough, somebody is going to want to know. So this has really been fun to talk to both of you. I'm so glad that we could get together. As I said, I felt like when I read both of your books, there was so much in common to discuss. So Mary Dixie's book does not actually publish till May 17th, but
May 25th.
Oh, is it the 25th now? Oh, okay. So when our copies come, we have to sit on them for a while. Too bad. But anyway, it's exciting that we have it. And Katherine's wonderful book, The Siren, is out now. And The Lion's Den came out, was it last year, Katherine?
Last year, during COVID.
Right.
No fun for anyone.
Right. Well, I really do like the colors, and I thought that the cover of the Lion's Den particularly was very effective. The way it shows the yacht and it's kind of our dream of a yacht, right? But your dream of a yacht turns into something of a nightmare. But why tell them that? So
All is not as it seems.
no, all is not as it seems. Anyway, it's really been a treat to talk to both of you. Thanks for spending some time with us. And I want to thank all of you who are watching it for spending part of your evening with us. There'll be a podcast of this event available to you. You want to recommend it to your friends, and it will live forever on Facebook. So feel free to nudge people to watch it. It's always good fun. Ladies, I'll send you the links to both, so you can do what you want to with them.
Thank you so much for having us on.
It's been wonderful. I really have enjoyed it and learned a lot. And one more thing I will say, since we have time, is that fascinatingly enough, some of the discussion was the same discussion that we had with the medievalists talking about the mystic English.
Really?
Yep. And I'll tell you what it was. Marjorie Kemp, who's the main character in Mary Sherritt's book, is a woman who had 14 children and decided she didn't want a 15th. And in order to do that, she basically had to leave home or leave her husband. Although to get him to cooperate, she paid off all his debts. She had a wealthy father, but she also was a merchant in her own right. So first she paid him off, and then she went on pilgrimage. But the big question was, what would people think of her for abandoning her 14 children and starting out, in a new life? And then on her way, she meets a woman, Julian of Norwich, a mystic who has been walled up for 40 years in a small cell outside a church. And Julian has written a manuscript, which is really rare for women to have written at all in the 15th century. And Julian hands it over to Marjorie and asks her to take it on pilgrimage with her and disseminate it, even though her whole view is contrary to much of the Catholic Church, and will get knocked for her being a woman at all, daring to write about theological matters. And, it was really fascinating coming back to our discussion about celebrity and, breaking barriers and so forth. Patrick, didn't you, I thought it was so interesting because it's a very modern discussion, even though it's centuries ago.
Funny how she drew the line at 15.
Yeah, right. I drew the line at 2.
Well, I think the 14th might have been a difficult birth. And she also,
just one too many, goddammit.
Yeah. Well, you know what? If you survive 14 babies at a time when there was no medical care, wouldn't you truly want to go on pilgrimage to Jerusalem? And,
Oh my God.
whatever. But honestly, I think it's so interesting that the same questions that we're talking about, were true then. So
People don't change much, do
It's
they?
human nature, right? I mean, to be human, the human condition is something that we've all been dealing with as humans, as long as humans have been around. That's why we all still, to bring it back to our earlier mention of Shakespeare, that's why we all still love Shakespeare, because the stories that he tells are human stories, and we can, even all these years later, still identify with them.
absolutely true. And, there's a focus at the moment on women's stories. Certainly World War II, which has become an entire subgenre of historical fiction. What we're reading right now are all women's stories about what they did during the war and how they survived and how they coped and kept the home front going, as opposed to after the war, when all we got were men's stories about fighting, and so I think it's really interesting to be looking at a group of people in the 15th century, 2 women who were being brave and, breaking barriers and all the rest of it. And then you're talking about basically the same thing, even if Delta Dawn wants to take over another life, she's still trying to craft her own story. And in the same way that your characters, Katherine, are, rightly or wrongly trying to craft their own stories.
As are all of us.
Yeah,
That's
no,
right.
it's exactly true. So, it's been a really interesting day. So thank you for bookending it with me. I really enjoyed it. Good night, everybody. Thanks for joining.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank you
you
for having us. Thank you, Katherine.
And thank you, Mary Dixie Carter. I'm
Bye.
so glad to finally meet you.
Good night.
Good night. Take care.